I'm Hamish Jackson. I'm a potter from England, but I'm now living in Oregon. We're currently at Pleasant Hill Pottery, just south of Eugene, and I make functional pots from cups, bowls, mugs, teapots. I'm trying to make a living as a potter, which is a challenge. I started out, I did a literature degree, and then sometime during that I realised I wanted to be making pottery. My grandparents lived 3 miles from a pottery in the Cotswolds in England, beautiful rolling hills. I just called them up and said, can I come and work in the summer? You know, I was just interested in pottery. I tried it out. Lauren's dad does it as a hobby, and so he took me along and I had a go and I really liked it. And so then I found this pottery called Winchcombe Pottery in the Cotswolds. They let me come. They couldn't pay me in the beginning, but they said, like, you can come and sort of like work experience. I made myself useful enough that they paid me £50 a week. And I was doing all sorts of stuff like mixing clay, glazes, cutting wood for wood firing. And on Thursday afternoons, they would let me make pots. They had a line of pots. So I was making 4-inch bowls with 8 ounces of clay, and I had to make hundreds of them until there was one that was like acceptable. And they would look at them. Mike Finch, who was running the place, he would look at the bowls and be like, no, and then they would get reclaimed, put into a bucket of water and reclaimed. And then next Thursday afternoon I'd try again, you know. And eventually I got to the point where I could make them acceptable. And we also decorated them, so I started learning how to use slip and decorate the bowls. And then after some time, they let me make beakers, like little cups, and then a few mugs. And it was my first real taste of pottery, production pottery, and I really liked it. There's something very satisfying about making a whole board that looked like just right. The way it was always done in the past was potters located near the clay, and they dug it, and the very first glazes people made were just mixing that clay with some wood ash. You know, from the stove, you just sieve it and add it maybe 50-50 with your clay, and it will melt on the pot. A lot of people will just go and get their materials delivered from China or England or Spain or from all over the world. You know, it's a global market for finely processed powders that are useful in pottery. From the clay to the glaze, like, people use materials from all over, and they just don't really think about where they're from or the impact of it on the environment or the people who mine them. Maybe a decent amount of potters know that cobalt is a problem, like cobalt mining. The majority of it comes from the Congo, and it's extremely destructive. It's just terrible for the environment there and the people. You know, it gets into the water supply, it's in the air. But in most studios, there'll be a glaze made with cobalt. You know, it makes a blue, it makes a beautiful blue. But I don't want to do that, you know, I don't want to use those materials that are problematic. The roots of this investigation into using local materials really came from my time at Winchcombe, where I started. That pottery was set up in like 1926 as a studio pottery by this guy Michael Cardew, who's quite a well-known, he's sort of one of the fathers of studio pottery. He's got this book which is quite famous, it's called Pioneer Pottery, and I read this whilst I was there, and it really goes into all the details of being a potter and using the materials around you. So this is a great book, and this was also the reason why I really wanted to do the apprenticeship for Mark Hewitt, because Mark was one of Cardew's apprentices. He lives in Pittsburgh, North Carolina, and he uses a gravel from Chapel Hill, which is just 15 minutes away. Whilst I was there, it was one of my jobs to like get the gravel, grind it up, like break it up, grind it in a ball mill, and then set it out to dry, and then make glazes from it. And so that was you know, seeing that process and doing it made me kind of excited about it. It's hard work, but seeing the local materials in use, what you could do with them. You know, he's got a variety of glazes from this one material. And whilst I was there, we also investigated some other local materials, and we made a beautiful blue celadon and ran lots of tests. And so working there really kind of made me realize that it was possible to still do that today. Wood firing is the most sustainable method of firing, but it's definitely the hardest, takes the longest. You get more seconds than any other firing. You know, you can get an electric kiln, you can press a button, you can have clay that you bought in a bag, glazes that you can even buy glaze. You don't even have to buy the powders to mix them, you know. Boom, just click of a button, done, you know. I'm doing it, yeah, in the hardest, least economically viable way. The clay takes millions of years to decompose from granite, or, you know, there's different ways clays are made, but it takes a really, really long time for this to, you know, for the platelets all to get in alignment and it to become something that we can form into a pot. Like, so much weathering and time has been applied to this material to make it usable, and then it's a magical thing. You know, you can dig it, bring it to the studio and make something with it that's useful for someone. It's amazing. You know, it shouldn't be taken lightly. It's kind of it's a spiritual thing, and I feel that comes through in the wood firing too. Like, you're so much more connected to the firing process. Like, by chopping the wood and stacking it by the kiln, putting it in piece by piece, firing the kiln through the day and night, you're really connected to the process of taking it from clay to a fired, sturdy piece of pottery that can be used forever, yeah, if someone looks after it. And when you use a cup that is made with the local material, like, for example, this mug, this glaze is made from a granite that I collected in Devil's Playground in Utah, mixed with some dolomite from Logan Canyon in Utah. And so when I use this, I think about those places. You know, it triggers a memory. That's very strong with me because I actually went out and collected them. But I've had that with customers too. Like, I made this one glaze from lake bed sediment from Hiram Dam, which was about half an hour from where I lived in Logan, Utah. And I met this customer at a sale who he used to go swimming in this lake in Hiram Dam in the reservoir, and so he was thrilled to know that this bowl had that material from it, and you know, so he had that connection. And if I can do that, if I can connect the pots to the place and the people to the place, I think that it's a good thing.